On this week's episode, we're talking about what should I do when I want to scale my business. My number one tip, you've got to make sure that your foundation is solid. When I talk about the foundation, I'm talking about the things that you do daily, weekly, quarterly, annually, having all of that in a dialed in schedule so you know exactly what you're supposed to do so things are not falling through the cracks. If you followed along in our journey for any length of time, you know that I love the Profit First system. That system was created by Mike Michalowicz, and I love it. It is how I run all of my businesses and keep everything on track. So let's start off with what I do on a daily basis. So every day I'm logging into my bank accounts to check my bank balances. Now, this is not only to see what has cleared my checking account previously, but also to keep an eye out if anybody has fraudulently withdrawn money from my bank accounts. Unfortunately, I was part of a huge scam with the unemployment office. And so I have noticed that things have been popping up. Things have been charged to my credit card that weren't there before. So I'm always checking those balances to make sure that I'm catching anything that might be popping up that I wasn't aware of before. Now, every week I am scanning and filing all my paperwork from the previous week. Now, this task to me is something that I do not like to do. So that's why I have to schedule it every single week, because if I don't do it, then it becomes this giant mountain of paperwork and it's just something that I just it's overwhelming to me. And so that's why I carve out time every week to get it done. Every week, I'm also completing my weekly review. Now, if you haven't seen me speak or haven't heard me talk about that, I'll run through it really quick right now, but just know if you are curious about it, if you'd like more information, you can always shoot me a DM on Instagram or shoot me an email and I can send you over my weekly checklist. So for my weekly review process, I am processing through any notes that I'm taking. I'm reviewing my previous calendar data, making sure that if there's anybody that I need to follow up with this week from the previous week, making sure that I'm getting it added to this week's to-do list. I'm also reviewing my upcoming appointments, making sure that the calendar is scheduled appropriately, giving myself enough time if I need to drive somewhere or in between Zoom calls, just making sure that everything gives me enough time to grab a glass of water in between appointments, whatever the case may be. I'm also going to brain dump. So that means just dumping everything out of my head, getting it all onto a piece of paper. So that way it's not living in my head and I'm not stressing out about it. I want to review my projects, my next actions list. I'm also going to review my waiting for list. So if I'm waiting for someone to get back to me on something, making sure that all of those lists are up to date. And if I need to follow up with somebody, making sure that gets done. I'm also going to review my checklist, my calendar pages. And like I said, if you're more interested in how I do my weekly review, I can definitely send you that checklist. Mine's a little bit more involved because I've been doing it for many, many years now. One thing that I've done is I'm taken different people's systems and combined those all into something that I do. So if you're interested in looking at my weekly review, but also seeing what else is out there, I encourage you to check out Michael Hyatt, David Allen. They all have versions of their weekly reviews. Now, every 10th and 25th, those are the days that I pay bills. So let me run you through how I do that. I add up all the new deposits in my receivable accounts for each separate business. Once I've added those up, I've times them by 15% because that's my percentage. But again, like Profit First mentions, make sure that you start small. Don't start with 15%. I've worked up to that dollar amount over the years. Once I have that number, then I make my transfers. So from my receivable account to my profit account, then again from receivable to my tax account, from receivable to payable, and any other money that's left over gets transferred from receivable to my vault account. Again, my vault account is one of the event strategies. If you have listened to my previous podcast where I talk more in depth about Profit First, that is the account that I use for saving up money for my E&O insurance, any big purchases that I know are coming up. So just keep that in mind. You don't necessarily need to start with a vault account. I then want to pay everyone's salaries, my own salary, anything like that out of the payable account, as well as paying all the bills that are due for the 10th or the 25th. Now, every quarter, I'm going to take my quarterly distribution. So, depending on what I'm using that money for, I may use some of it to celebrate. I may use some of it to pay bills off. It just depends on where I'm at financially, depending on what's going on in any given quarter. I'm also going to pay any tax liabilities. Now, this is typically done by my bookkeeper, so it's not something that I need to focus on. It's usually just a quick check in to make sure that it's been done. Every quarter, I'm also going to check my credit scores just to make sure that nothing has popped up. Now, that might be something that you don't necessarily need to do every quarter. I encourage you to, because just like checking your bank account balances every day, it's something that you can catch ahead of time. And if you are subscribed to something like Credit Karma or Experian, any of those credit checking systems, it will alert you if anything pops up. But like I said, because of the fraud that's happened, my credit is currently locked down. So it's just something that I like to jump in and check on, make sure that there's nothing new that I might have missed. Now, every year, I'm going to file my annual report for the businesses, and that can vary from year to year. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the end of December. One of my businesses renews in July, one of them renews in September. It just depends on when you started your business. And I'm also going to pay my taxes. So again, this is something that you want to defer to your accountant to make sure that you may be paying quarterly versus annually. It just depends on your specific situation. So make sure that you check with your team and your experts on that before making those payments.